Welcome to Finding the Frame. I'm your host Xander Miller. This is the show where we practice discernment through dialogue. And today, I have a very special guest, my my friend John Frank from the beautiful islands, Jean-François Bélisle. Uh, JF, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Xander?
I'm good. Um, Yeah, it's been a while since I've actually gotten around to recording it, and I thought like a good thing to talk to you about would be discipline and horarium, which is like the practice of developing moving your life towards good habits, like the idea that the Christian idea that we are what we do in a lot of
Yeah,
respects. So we need to actually move towards the path to virtue is developing these good habits where we hone what we do every day such that we improve a bit. And I think you have a really great improvement story from your time in Japan. So I thought like we could start with that. I because people don't know who you are, and I
sure.
think what we want to I think um what people celebrate a lot these days are these like um weight loss and personal improvement stories. So if you could like give us an overview of your journey in Japan from your height to your current your yeah your high weight to your current predicament.
Yeah, so mine is not going to be the super glorious, David Goggin-esque kind of story where I take off my shirt and scream out, "You don't know, you don't me, son." But it's so for a long time I was super sedentary. I think probably as long as you've known me, I was fairly
Mhm.
sedentary. And when I was living previously, so I lived in other countries in Asia. So when I was
Yeah.
living in another country previously, I
Just just
got a
just so we
pretty,
know, this that's like 20 years we've known each other almost. No, not
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I think it's been about 20 years now.
we're getting
Geez,
close.
time goes by
Yeah.
fast.
Well,
We knew each
16,
other
17.
before we had any kids, and now we're both at three, right? So,
Yeah. I didn't want to
so
interrupt the story too much, but
no,
so
don't worry about it.
but so you've been
Uh,
sedentary for like 20 years, but
yeah, so I've never been like active, right? But I got, when I was living in China, I got real big. So
how big is real
we're
big?
talking about uh, over 350 pounds.
Wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But you're a tall
I
guy
was a,
though.
yeah, yeah, but still, that's
Yeah. Hmm.
worryingly heavy.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what happened. Just one day, my wife was pregnant with her third, and just something snapped into place, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go. I need to get healthier. Like I'm not. I'm out of breath walking from one side of the apartment to the other. The apartment's not that big. It's so I started running. Now when I started running, we're talking about like I was dead by 500 meters, right?
Hmm.
Not even a kilometer in. Um, so I decided, and this fits into maybe daily sort of self-improvement. I decided, you know what? Distance doesn't matter as long as I do a little bit farther. That could be like 3 steps further than what I'm doing. So that's what I did every single day for almost a year. And I had some pretty good weight loss. And then I kept incorporating more and more activity into my lifestyle because once you get used to a good habit and once you get into like a pretty positive habit loop, you start, oh, I got another personal best. This is my fastest, whatever.
Hmm.
Early on in sort of a runner's kind of career, I guess it's not really a career, I'm not a pro, but early on in your running, right, you start getting lots of personal bests.
Hmm.
And then, it starts being positive and then you start running more and more. Um, so fast forward to today, because I'm not going to go in between, right? I got uh, sort of better and better habits, but what this got me to look at was a lot of this. Uh, it got me to a lot of introspection about what does this mean? Like I hadn't been doing this I reached 30 some, and I started doing this and started seeing immense progress. What does it mean? What is all of this sort of uh, what's how am I, how can I think about this? How can I think about this improvement? Because it was more than just, losing weight. The weight actually doesn't matter. I mean, I use the scale right now to sort of measure a little bit of how heavy I am, so that
Hmm.
I have a pretty good idea of how heavy I'm pulling when I'm doing a pull-up.
Hmm.
But I don't really care anymore. I don't think I'm in any stretch of the imagination close to 300 pounds right now.
Yeah.
I must be like 90, 92. So for like a 6'5" guy, it's pretty decent weight.
So
Um,
you're 192, you said?
I'm about 192. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Great. Oh,
I'm not
okay.
92.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
dangerously low.
Yeah, but that's like that's over 100 pounds of weight loss, but it's more than just the weight loss, right? Because it um like there's the big number you said from going like 350 to 190, but really, there's not a big difference for you between whether you're like 185 or 200 or 192. Once you're in that zone, or like once you're regulating that, then there's other things that you're working on, right? So it's your body fat, your cardio, and like your cardio health, and that, right? So there's other metrics you
Yeah.
need to.
Well, actually, now I'm trying to gain, right? So I'm not trying to gain like fat. Nobody wants that. But I'm trying to gain lean body mass, and I have been gaining. So I was much, much, much lower in weight. Um, I started doing quite a bit of body weight exercise and quite a bit of weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
Stopped the weightlifting because I'm sort of on my own in the gym. And once you reach a couple of plates, you start thinking, if I fail on this lift, I nobody's going to save me, right?
Yeah.
So, and I have like a pretty sort of like sparse kind of gym, right? So it's not one of these things where like I have everything I can use for powerlifting, but nothing to actually save me. It's not like a
Hmm.
Smith machine or anything. So I'm doing quite a bit of body weight stuff, but still, with proper diet, proper whatever, I'm looking to gain now. So it doesn't really matter once you reach a certain level of health, right? Weight, like everybody's focused on this, like, oh, I lost this much weight, and it really doesn't, like, nobody should care about this. That's why I said like
Yeah.
you should care about it all the way up to the point where you're feeling good and healthy, right? And if you're feeling healthy, you're feeling good, you're doing better. You can self-improve. You're not feeling limited anymore. Your goals have moved from like, let me just be able to do a 5K to like, oh, I need to like get my VO2 max to that level. Then that weight doesn't matter anymore.
Well, like, if I could use an analogy, I think that like one of the things that people are concerned about is um is like once you reach one goal, then that's going to be the end of it. Then you're going to be fit, but there's always more goals beyond that. So if I could, but I was just thinking of this analogy of like, say you buy a house and you want to renovate it. And the previous owner was a bit of a hoarder, so it's filled with like uh old plastic milk jugs and stacks of old phone books, right? So and mail. So once you start getting those old phone books and plastic jugs out, uh you achieve that goal, but there's other things in the house that need to be fixed, and then you need to paint the walls, then you need to actually redo the flooring, take out the old carpet. But well, the jugs and the old phone books are there, the floors and the and the paint on the walls isn't even a concern. But then once
Yeah.
that's taken care of, then next problems reveal themselves. And
Yeah, and the problems become sort of less and less urgent, right?
yeah.
It becomes more, you go from like, this place is a dump to, I could use a different color.
Yeah.
And that's sort of when you reach that goal, then you don't really care about the things as you know, it felt urgent when I wasn't healthy.
Hmm.
Now that I'm healthy, it doesn't feel urgent anymore, but there's still a sense of urgency, right? There's this the only thing that actually mattered, and it didn't matter if I performed well. It didn't matter if I liked my workout, if I was sick, if I didn't feel
Hmm.
like it. You know, even, you know, if I had one drink too many, I don't drink anymore, but if I'd had one drink too many
Hmm.
that the night before, it didn't matter. You know, I was hungover. I went out, put on my running shoes, and I went out. I was tired. I thought, you know what? I'm at least going to get out there and let's see what happens. And then I went out and I kept showing up. Um, that's why I said it's not super, you know, like self-improvement is not glorious because 90% of it is sort of just trudging through a lot of showing up, right? You're there, you show up, and it doesn't really matter if you've done a stellar workout or if you haven't, at least you showed up. And then you start caring about how well you're doing, what your
Hmm.
performance is, because you've sort of developed that sort of positive habit loop, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's
It's
where,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
go
more
ahead.
than that. It's also, I think, discipline. Like the like Jocko Willink says that whole discipline equals freedom thing, but that what I think what you're getting at there is this is um again that sort of pattern of like once you've established the habit, then there's the new then you can start worrying about your metrics. Once you've established that good habit of showing up, of logging of every day, of had that habit, then you can move on to the next order habit or the next nice
Yeah.
to have, which is, well, what is my performance actually like? But if you stress too much about that performance before you've developed the good habit of just showing up, that can just become another excuse that could stop you from showing up.
Yeah, well, it's like runners, right? Everybody wants to run a marathon. They started running, they've barely done a 5K yet,
Hmm.
but everybody wants to do a marathon. And it's not always realistic to do it. And if you set your sights on a marathon, like, you know, 4 months into running,
Hmm.
yeah, you might get a little discouraged. You probably get injured because you're running into a
Hmm.
marathon plan and you're getting your load way too high and you tiring yourself out and you don't feel like doing it anymore and you're wondering, why do I do this? Right. So that's what small improvements, a little bit at a time, right? Sort of that Japanese philosophy of kaizen sort of fits pretty well in there, right?
Yeah.
Where
Can you
if you
explain that a
do,
bit? Yeah.
yeah, so kaizen is the philosophy where when you do small adjustments and improvements over time, they amount to be a very large improvement in the long run.
Yeah.
So you don't focus on doing you don't focus on running the marathon, you focus on, you know what, I'm having trouble doing this, so I'm gonna sort of let's see how far I can go. I'm gonna go a little bit farther. Sort of what I did when I started running, right? Barely run 500 meters. I run 503 meters. Great. But the thing is, you never just do just a little bit more because you reach a point where you're like, you know what, I could do a lot more than this. And
Yeah.
then you realize that, oh, I did 5K today. This is the first time I've ever done this. I've never even run 3K before, but it's because you develop the habit, you develop the discipline,
Yeah.
the endurance, and the small improvements. Um,
Just on that,
but
I just want to sort
yeah,
of bring in there that idea of Kaizen, tie it back to the idea of habits, right?
yeah,
And this incremental thing over time that um it's so much of who we are and what we do is what we do every day, like the incremental thing. And partly because of the way our memories work, we sort of like think of these big moments and that the landmarks, but we don't realize that most of our life is in that those in between areas that are often driven by these habits. And that's where like the kaizen, like we were talking about the kaizen of these little incremental changes turn into these um big things over time, like these big mountains over time. And conversely, though,
well, yeah,
you can think about it the other way, because what I've just started doing with my kids is uh I've set up a jar of jelly beans for them, each of them, and it has written on it, um, uh, Elise's childhood, Ian's childhood, and how how each jelly bean represents a week left until they're 18. So the idea
Wow.
is each week you take a jelly bean and you think about what did you do this week and what are you grateful for and what can you do next week, right? Because and when you map it out like that, it's really not that many jelly beans. Like I had them think about like how
Yeah.
many jelly beans do you think you have for your child? How many weeks do you think you have in your childhood? And Ian said 2,000 and Lisa said like 5,000. So
Wow.
yeah, the reality is it was I think like 276 and 420 were the actual numbers of weeks they have. So and these weeks tick by, but what you do each week matters to where you end up. So that's just connecting it to the kaizen and the habits, right? It's like 350 um pound JF was not doing any chin ups. That wasn't on the the
That
roadmap.
wasn't even on the radar, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah.
That falls in nicely with how I've started thinking about this. So, I'm thinking about what's an average life expectancy.
Mhm,
So I added a little more, right? We always live a bit longer than what the life expectancy is right now because it's based on other people's, like our preceding sort of generations' lifespans, right?
mhm,
So I decided to be hopeful. So let's say at best, maybe I'll live like 80 years, maybe 90 to 100. I mean, it's
mhm,
possible, but let's just put it down to 80. What does that mean? That means I have all in my life 80 summers, 80 winters, 80 springs.
mhm,
So when I think about my goal setting right now, I'm thinking I have far fewer of these summers than I used to have. In fact, most of my summers are behind me now.
mhm.
Most, and it's not, to me, it's not depressing. To some people it might be, but to me it really pushes me to think, okay, there's a lot to accomplish. What's my realistic goals here, and how am I going to be better within this limited time frame? And this limited time frame, it really helps focus of like, no, I don't have time, because we tend to think of ourselves as having an unlimited amount of time to
Yeah.
accomplish what we're going to accomplish, and we don't. And the fact that, you know hey, can you imagine if you thought that you go into a party and you think the party's going to last forever? Like, you're not going to party in the same way, right?
Yeah.
But if you know the party's going to end, you're going to organize it. You're going to set it up. You know how
Mhm.
it's, what's going to happen. And it's the same here, right? I'm looking at this as I need to organize this because this party's going to end.
Yeah.
So what do I want to what do I want to do? What are my goals here?
Yeah.
And this has really helped me sort of center my goals, because understanding that we're sort of finite, our life is finite, makes us understand that, okay, no, there isn't, like, because we all have, I think everybody has these aspirations, like, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do
Mhm.
that, these like great things. And then we never actually flip the switch and do it. We don't go sign up for that marathon or that ultra marathon. We don't actually try our
Yeah.
first pull up. We don't do any of these things.
Mhm.
We don't start writing that book we wanted to write.
Yeah. S-
All of that. We don't get started
That
because we
that
think I'll do it later.
yeah,
But
the carpe diem, and right, seize the day, and then you're right,
yeah,
and you really, if you want to achieve these things, you have to do that little incremental change, and you have to develop the good habits, and you have to do it now rather than later, right? Set the times. And there's two ways that our modern society and our media, I think, really disrupt our ability to plan out our lives that way and really live fulfilled lives. One is just what you said about like thinking the party never ends, right? Of like, it's really taboo in our society now to talk about um aging and death, like as something that's going to happen, like to all of us. Like what are you doing um before you die, right? Like, and sort of mapping that out. So we don't really think of the if you look at the media and that they're always trying to hide aging, and they're always trying to make everyone seem like they're immortal. Like there's this sort of this resistance to talking about things ending. At the same time, though, uh, so there's no mapping out of like, oh, look, you have 30 years or 80 or 60 years or 20 years. What are you going to do with that time? At the same time, though, there is this jamming of this sense of urgency. Everything we're always the media is always trying to push us into this crisis mode, right? Like Greta Thunberg told us 5 years ago that the world's going to end in 5 years. We have like all these we have like crisis Ukraine, crisis this, crisis that, right? Everything it's demanding our attention immediately. You must give this thing total attention. Um and the problem with that though is that we can't regulate and choose, like, hold on, what do I really want to spend my time? You're not paying it because you're paying attention. If we're always in crisis mode, we're never attending to the little things that really make a difference. Is
Yeah,
I
no,
want to go that.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. That sense of urgency. It's not just the media.
Yeah.
We have a whole system that's set up for it beyond the media. You want to buy something, you get it tomorrow.
Hmm.
You you don't get it tomorrow, you're super annoyed. You want to, and everything that's sold to us is like this, right? Take this pill and get skinny. Um, do this thing and you won't have to work for it, and you're going to get it before you know it. Um, and these sort of unrealistic expectations about how the world works, um, they're not just negative, they're pernicious because they go
Hmm.
into they create this sort of negative domino effect where our expectations of reality and our sights on reality, how we see reality, the sort of the entire perspective on reality is completely distorted. So we don't really live in a real system, in a real life anymore. We live in this weird imaginary world that was created by people who try to scare us into buying stuff
Hmm.
or adopting their ideology. Or we live
Hmm.
in their world, and at the same time we live in this la la land where we think that, oh, I'm going to live forever, so I don't actually need to put effort and start doing this now.
Yeah.
um, and I don't need to think about people are going to outlive me, so what am I going to do for these people so that I'm actually remembered beyond beyond my life here. We don't think of these things because we don't nobody wants to think about the end of things for us. Nobody wants to think about death and the end of life and things continuing without you.
Hmm.
And it's I just feel that this entire kind of uh, social shift towards living in this sort of simulated reality, um, it gets people to not improve, to give up
Yep.
on doing things that are better, to stop thinking about what they can do now and start just thinking about these big moments instead of realizing that not everything um, not everything is going to just be a big moment. It's like playing video games, right?
Yeah.
90% of the video game, you're just grinding through
Yeah.
to get the resources to get to this boss fight. And we just think about the boss fight all the time, right? We're like, oh,
Hmm.
we're at the final, this final boss fight here. And you try to do that in a video game, see how fast you're gonna
Yeah.
lose, right? And it's the same, no, but it's the same thing here,
Yeah.
right? A video game operates according to certain parameters and rules set up by the
I,
programmers.
I I call
And
video
our life
game
works in the same way.
yeah, I
Yeah,
I
good.
call video games meaning porn. Because like
Meaning
if
porn, I like
meaning
it.
porn, because if you're because they're setting you goals, in this artificial world and setting you achievements and grind in the in this artificial world. Um, just like pornography is this artificial relationship, right? That you're having, like amorous relationship. It's the same sort of thing. It's giving you it's providing you it's satisfying a thirst or a desire of life with this with this phantasm, with this illusion that makes you feel at the time like you're fulfilling this need that you're not really fulfilling. And that's exactly right. What you're saying is like, yeah, people will grind in the video game because it has like this it has this nice meaning curve for them, right? Where they sort of like, oh, I can see that I'm getting this stuff for the boss fight, right? So they actually game developers actually have described what they call as the game's difficulty curve, but it's really they call it the difficulty curve, but really it is it's sort of the meaning curve, right? So that the grind always feels meaningful enough to keep you continue playing. Unfortunately, life is not set up that way, which is why people reject the grind in life so much, right? Because
It's not set up that way to the point where
yeah,
even the attempts to gamify life doesn't work.
yes.
Now,
Oh,
I used to
I
own
just
an Apple Watch, for example,
okay.
right?
I just before you go on, I was just
Yeah, go
described
ahead.
what the way I describe that is because we don't have the graduated difficulty, what we actually have is most of the most important things in life are behind what I call dopamine deserts, right?
Yeah,
Where there's you there's a long grind where you're just improving, but you can't tell that you're improving because it's just a desert. It's everywhere you are in the desert seems to be just like the rest of the desert, and there's no dopamine from it. There's no hit of achievement until you get to the mountains in the distance, right? So
yeah.
yeah, and gamification is one way to try and get over that desert. But yeah, so so tell me about your Apple Watch.
No, I mean, like I used to have this Apple Watch. I have a better, proper runner's GPS watch now that can
Hmm.
actually survive a marathon. But I used to have this Apple Watch where they gamified every single thing that you did, right? So you had I mean, every watch has this, even my Garmin has
Hmm.
this right now. But Apple is particularly with those close those rings and all these achievements for every single thing that you do. And then you start realizing that in real life, these achievements don't actually work. You can't
Hmm.
gamify life that way. You can't have, oh, you've leveled up, because it actually stops mattering, because then you start interacting with others and you realize that nobody cares if you close your movement ring, right?
Yeah, there's no office party for that.
Exactly,
No one's
right?
gonna be clinking their champagne glasses. Right?
Exactly. And even for me, right? I feel super excited, like, oh, I did a personal best on a 5K. I ran like a 20-minute 5K. I think this is pretty awesome. I think this is great. Actually, for my age group, it's not bad,
Mhm.
right? And I try to tell that, like, I feel good about it. But if I try to tell anybody about it, like, literally nobody cares about my like sub 20 5K, right? Is
Mhm.
nobody cares. I'm the only person who cares. But the what this means is that, and this is why games are not a really good analog for life, is we're social creatures who live with other people, and the entire society that's constructed around us, where we're doing everything urgent as if the party's never going to end and we want everything
Mhm.
now without putting any effort, is it's not factoring other people in. It really isn't. This is the we're living in this weird anti-social time where everybody cares about everybody else in a gossipy kind of way,
Mhm.
but nobody actually cares about other people in a real kind of
Yeah,
way.
it's not authentic.
Um, the authenticity of caring for other people is a rare commodity. If somebody
Yeah.
cares for you in a way that's completely, like they're not expecting anything from you, like it's it's something rare. It's something really
Yeah.
rare nowadays. Even like we sometimes have trouble doing it with people we love, right?
Hmm.
Because we're so stuck in this world where
Yeah.
we're stuck in our own minds that sometimes we do something we don't realize that actually I'm acting in a really antisocial way right now. Right.
Yeah. And that's, I think,
Um,
just on that, that's why um this utopianism, right? That is so dangerous. I mean, I there's different ways I can come at this, but this idea of like, we're going to go and design this perfect world in the future, um, is well, there's if we think about things that way, well, there's always things wrong with the world. There's always things where we can just living for that future, living for that grind. And it's important, like it is, to do the grind for the future, but the authenticity is also important. And I think that's one of the key things about Christianity is it's like our Messiah has already been here, right? It's the goal is to connect our is to connect ourselves to the real, to the authentic. And it's more than just the material world. It's also like this, there's a spiritual dimension to being connected to the authentic, but it's life is happening right now. So like you said, like seize the day. You have to have it planned. You have to have it ordered. Like you have to look at those habits, but you also have to find joy in those moments now. And you get that from the people you interact with, and you get that from um just marveling at at what what we call mundane, but it's like every second is a gift of your life. Every moment you're alive is this remarkable accumulation of events that's brought this about. And
but
yeah,
yeah, but everything you do does still come with a reward and an improvement. It's just that we don't see it, right?
yes.
Um, so like I did a super hard leg day workout yesterday, which means that my run tonight was really painful. But that has nothing to do with it.
But you're well rested. The AI said so.
The AI didn't say I was well rested. The
Oh,
AI
okay.
said I was going to suffer. So,
Didn't it suffer? Say you're gonna
but
suffer because you were well rested. I thought that's what you told me
well,
something.
I slept well,
Oh, you
right?
slept
So I
well.
slept well enough.
Hmm.
Slept well enough. My load's been low because I hurt my ankle some couple of weeks ago. Now I'm
Hmm.
back on the road. But yeah, so I could still handle the load. But what I'm coming to is when I did this leg day, I didn't think about the fact that I'm going to be a stronger runner, but it is pretty much getting a better run installment plan every time I do these. Because every time I do these, even if I don't see the sort of the improvements, every time I do it, I'm getting slight improvements. I'm getting stronger. I'm getting a little bit better, get better posture. And all of those things are small installments that I get a little bit at a time. And this is
Hmm.
why our life doesn't work in a gamified way. Because
Hmm.
everything that we do, the reward is so small over such a long span of time
Yeah.
that you can't gamify it because it would be the worst reward ever, right? It'd be like
Yeah. And the game
you
of
get 1/1000th of a diamond, you know.
that's a good point. Yeah, it's too incremental, and it makes the celebration fake, right? And
Yeah,
you can't yeah like the intention there is to sort of like put like a slope of reward to get you to pull you um through the dopamine desert, but it doesn't, it doesn't work because the rewards, like you say, are too incremental, and they're too like they're ultimately too ephemeral and too fake. Like because you're doing something real, it becomes so obvious that the reward it isn't real, right? Because yeah,
yeah.
there's a juxtaposition, but um yeah,
Well,
so it's
you see through it, right? So when I did one of my degrees is in psychology,
mhm,
and uh, you know, when you learn all these tricks to get people to talk to you,
Hmm.
when somebody else starts psychoanalyzing you, you know it, and it breaks the spell
Hmm.
of all psychoanalysis, right? It's like, okay, you're prompting me. Like, I know exactly what you're doing.
Hmm.
And it's the same here, right? The moment you wake up to sort of what the reality around you is, then that magic of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this in like 20 days. I'm gonna get these abs. Like, by the way, nobody gets abs in 20 days, but
Except you.
and you
End
know,
of by end of the July.
well, for 3 years in the making.
Yeah.
So
So eventually it's
see
20
how,
days.
yeah, see how long it took me to grind towards that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just anyway, it just sort of I lost my train of thought on this,
I know
but
I did. You were talking about
uh,
an analysis
oh
and then
yeah,
how
it's
it breaks the spell.
yeah,
Just like I broke your train of
and
thought.
no, that's fine, that's fine. Yeah, so but the moment it's like when you wake up to something, you can't go back to sleep,
Hmm.
right? Once you see something, you can't really unsee it.
Hmm.
And it's the same here, right? Once you start realizing how many summers you have, how many seasons you have to improve yourself, what you have to do, and the more you understand, the the less the society around you seems appealing, right?
Yeah.
I I don't think that rushing into things is appealing to me anymore.
Hmm.
You know, and the fitness world has this, right? I got really heavy into the whole fitness world before I realized just how much of a sham the entire industry is.
Mm.
They don't care about how healthy you are. Nobody does. I mean, 90% of these people aren't actually natural.
Hmm.
They're they're on something. They're on trend. They're on, you
Yeah.
know, they're on some performance enhancement drug somewhere.
Hmm.
And you know, they're not telling you this. Instead, they're saying, "Oh, if you want this, do this following stupid exercise." Like nobody who's
Hmm.
ever gotten these results is doing this exercise,
Yeah.
right? It's just let's face it here. Like your freaking mountain climbers aren't going to get you healthier. They're a stupid exercise designed by a committee,
Hmm.
and they you know they look really hard, but they improve nothing. And once you start asking these questions about self-improvement, then you start asking these questions in other areas, like what's the point of this? And then it
Yeah.
sadly creeps into work, right? Like,
Mm.
oh, I'm sitting in this meeting. Why are we having this meeting again?
Yeah.
And then you start asking these inconvenient questions, or maybe really convenient for you, of like, okay, we're doing this meeting here. What are we looking to resolve? And then nobody
Yeah.
knows. And it's like, all right, see ya.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not having this meeting because you guys are accomplishing nothing.
Hmm.
And this is an hour meeting. That's 60 minutes and literally never getting back. Like, you know, I can't turn back time on it. So I'm going to go do 60 minutes of useful work. And when you guys
Yeah.
know what you actually want out of this meeting, we'll have a meeting again.
Yeah. That's
Um,
I just want to get back
yeah,
to that on that idea of the spell though, right? And of breaking spells is um I think part of the way of getting back, like because you talked about psychologists and the psychoanalysis and how it being a spell and the spell people once you know how the spell crafting works, then the spells don't work.
yeah,
I think that's actually why, what I'm trying to do with this with my dialogues and finding the frame here is because I think that a lot of the spells that are being cast on society right now are potentially trying to disrupt our cognitive frame regulation. And once you know how those spells are being cast, right? That people actually do want you disrupted. They don't want you to be able to plan your life and live your life the fullest because they would rather that they can control your life and put you into these pseudo realities, these make believe worlds that they can then direct and use to control you. And they'd rather be in control of of you even though that you're less productive and then you're creating less for society than not be in control of you, right? Um, I don't want to make
Well, yeah,
yeah, there's these spells, and once and teaching these people how these spells work is helps people break them, right? And helps people get back to reality. Um, and I wanted to actually also bring that to something else I wanted to talk about because we were talking about these
yeah,
habits. Is there's three things in Christianity that are part of preparation for Lent and Christian asceticism. So there's prayer, fasting. Oh man, what's the third one? Actually, and almsgiving, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, right? And each of those is to sort of, well, prayer is to focus you on God, focus you on what's good, but the fasting is that building of discipline, but also that pulling you away from comfort. Because what you were describing too, I think part of like that the developing the good habit in the beginning of running is doing the not succumbing to comfort, right? Not succumbing to your natural tendency to actually develop that sort of that discipline to get up in the morning and will yourself to do these things, right? And that gives you a certain level of freedom. And then the alms giving is so that detaches you from your pathos, right? Which you can think of as
yeah,
comfort, but also the third one is almsgiving separates you from ego, like living for other people separates you from um being attached of to that need for you to be the center of everything,
yeah,
which is
yeah, and yeah,
yeah.
that falls nicely into what I was saying, right, about
Hmm.
social and antisocial behaviors. Now, I'm not Christian in
Hmm.
any way, shape, or form. At least if
Yeah.
I am one, I'm a terrible one.
Yeah, yeah,
But
Joe. I technically you've been baptized, right? So you're in some way, shape, or
I,
form, right?
yeah, well, I'm
Yeah,
sort of a
but
lapsed Catholic, right?
yeah, yeah.
But I'm not like
Hmm.
under any measure of Christianity. I do not fit as any kind of good Christian or any
Yeah.
kind of Christian at all.
I
But
I would challenge you on that though, in that because I do think you do have, and I've seen this through your life, well, through most of it though. You have a grounding in truth, right? At least now, and like there's something like you do sort of value truth and think
yeah,
that there is a truth behind a truth underlying the world that's bigger than you, and not everyone believes that. So,
I think
or
everyone
opposite.
believes that. I think not everyone wants others to believe that because that doesn't allow them to control other people.
Yeah.
So I don't I don't think aside from maybe very severe mental illness where you really don't have a full grasp of what's going on around you. Um, I think everybody believes this.
Hmm.
The fact that they try to control you by creating this alternate reality is just proof that they do.
Yeah.
They believe this. Why would you try to create an alternate reality if you don't believe the current
Yeah.
reality exists? You're trying to create this alternate reality because you know that the moment people understand how things happen, how things work, the moment people understand that, you know, um, these ultra capitalist and ultra socialist ideologies are all kind of dangerous because behind all these utopias, when you push
Hmm.
them to realization, is a dystopia just waiting to happen.
Well,
Um,
they're not realizable because they're not real.
well,
Um,
yeah, well, that's what utopia means, right? It's a place
yeah,
that doesn't
not
exist. But
yeah.
but what I'm saying is behind every attempt to create a utopia is a dystopia, right? Because the moment you
Hmm.
I mean, try to realize Marx's workers' paradise, and you realize that it's actually not paradise, it's hell.
Yeah.
Um, that's what you get, right? All of these sort of utopias are the same, even on the hyper capitalist kind of like super selfish,
Yeah.
self-made man kind of
One
Ayn
thing
Rand kind of. ideology can get really
Yeah.
dangerous when you push it too far because you get to this
Yeah.
really weird dystopia.
I want to say, like, just to uh, um well, there's a couple things I want to say that, but the one, and this may seem a little pedantic at first, but you said alternate reality, and I like the term pseudo reality or make
Yeah.
believe, because the way it's, alternate reality sounds like someone's just completely replaced one reality with the other,
Yeah. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah.
how these pseudo realities are actually created is they add a little bit of fake, right? They always
It's
they
okay. Yeah.
take away some truth and put in some fake. They know the truth, and that becomes their gnosis, their hidden knowledge that they use to control it, right? That's how they become the man in the back room controlling things, because but there's the magic only works if things are still mostly real. It's only there's been a few lies. There's a little fake here and there that's put in, and eventually the things break down because too much fake is put in, and it's
Yeah.
unsustainable, right?
Yeah. No. Okay. I get what you mean. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's sort of a ersatz reality.
yeah,
Um,
and yeah. So, and on that
yeah.
way too,
No.
I've been thinking a lot about the
Good.
term ideology, and
Yeah.
I think you're right that ideologies always become more and more disconnected until they collapse and become total dystopias. And it's
Yeah.
because ideologies are fundamentally fixed frames. So I talked about like the cognitive frame regulation before, like, and that's actually what good theology, what theological religions paramount above them, Christianity and Catholicism, but there's other paths too that are still theological in the sense that they try and help with this frame regulation, like a lot of Buddhism. Um,
Yeah.
they uh, if you have to have that flexible flame, so you can actually stay, because we're moving, we're dynamic, we're changing. So to stay connected to the real and the authentic, we need to re-regulate our frame and sort of get our orientation again as we're moving through time and space and all these other things. Um,
Yeah, so we get our bearings from thinking about things as fixed, right? Because I mean, otherwise, how can we start understanding who we are, what we are in the total beginning? But then as we slowly evolve as
mhm.
adults and people who think, we need to stop thinking like children.
Yeah.
And this is what these ideologies are. They're inherently childish. They're teaching, re-educating people into thinking in their way. And it's like
So
educating children. We need to start thinking about things as processes.
so
Things are go ahead.
I just want to say, so what I'm offering as a, because I've been thinking about this idea, what is ideology a lot, and
Yeah,
ideologies I think are fixed frame regulations. They're actually a fixed frame. They're like
yeah,
you've heard the idea of lenses, like ideological lens. It's a way of looking at the world one specific way, right?
yeah.
So what ideologies you can think of as these fixed programs. The first step is to disrupt a person's frame regulation. And when a person's ability to disrupt their own frame becomes regulated, they're dysregulated. That puts them in an existential crisis. They don't know who they are anymore, and it also puts them in a meaning crisis. Nothing seems meaningful to them anymore, right? So they're depressed and anxious. Who's feeling that way lately, right? Pretty much everybody. So
Welcome to my world for the
yeah.
last, I don't know, like little while. Yeah,
So when you're once you're dysregulated and you need a frame, then allows the malicious actor an opportunity to inject an ideology into, because an ideology provides you a fixed frame. It provides you an understanding of the world, but it's not a self-regulating one. It's a very it's a fixed one. It's one way, and it gives you, if you're in that state of dysregulation, frame dysregulation, when you're anxious, or it makes you anxious and depressed, then off having this ideology gives you something that isn't truth, but it gives you something to cling on to, a way of understanding the world that seems a lot better than just being dysregulated. So you glom onto that, and that's how you become this NPC, or this you trapped in this ideology, is that you have this thing now that allows you to, it's not frame regulation, it's a fixed frame, but it is a frame for you to start understanding and engaging with the world again. And but since it's fixed, it's going to become, it's not going to be flexible, it's not going to change to the reality. So eventually it's going to become this utopian. Eventually you're going to be so far, it's going to be so far disconnected from reality that that ideology is going to break, and you'll be back into the crisis mode, existential and meaning crisis mode. But until then, you have these fixed frames. So I don't know if you
But that's fine though, because they're waiting right around the corner to sell you your next
ideology.
ideological
Yeah,
frame.
yeah.
So, we need to be careful with these easy answers, right?
Hmm.
And this facile way of thinking of like, oh yeah, there's this very simple explanation, and if you do this one thing, then you're going to be fine.
Hmm.
Or if this one thing is this an absolute crisis. Nothing works like this in the world. I mean, it does sometimes, but if you're living in a world where everything is a crisis all the time at that level, you're
Hmm.
not going to live very long,
Yeah.
right? Like, because it's an actual crisis. Like you will die eventually after facing like 23 crises in a week, right?
Yeah.
It's not, that's going to kill you. So
What
you're
was that
not facing
Japanese?
these,
What was that Japanese term that you used? The incremental change?
yeah,
Or
kaizen, yeah.
Kazan. So I think that like if you're in control of the Kazan, you can like do something great. But if you're always in this crisis mode, there's still a Kazan of little problems in your life because you're not
Yeah,
attending to them. And
sort of a
eventually,
dark kaizen, yeah.
dark Kaizen, right? And over time, like if you're in this fixed ideological frame or you're always in this crisis mode and you're not attending to those little things in your life, eventually that dark Kaizen is going to become a kaiju
Yeah,
and just tear your whole ideological frame world apart, right? Because it's you haven't it's your habits have not you've not been making the right sacrifices, and instead of incrementing having like incremental changes in your life that are good, you're having this incremental changes towards awful that are coming in your life, and it'll just come and consume you one day.
yeah. So one of these things that got me to get better at discipline, self-discipline, and my perspectives on how things should be working without actually, relying on other people telling me how they should be working is process thinking, right? So nothing that we do, you're sort of talking about that. We are what we do in
Yeah,
life, right?
yeah,
Like we don't have an inherent, like good, bad, neutral kind of thing. It's we're sort of the conjugation of everything that you do in
yeah,
life, right? It's like you're basically a verb. You're what you're doing.
yeah.
And so if you're
Well,
doing things in
at
the
at the heart of the Christian
yeah,
and
go ahead.
Catholic faith, sorry, at the heart of the Judeo Christian is God, and God is being, right? Like I am
Yeah,
that I am, right? So being is, and you're saying is sort of like is the most elemental form of doing, right? It's or the most
yeah,
abstracted doing abstracted is being. So I mean this so I just this as this, that's why I
yeah.
agree with you on this sort of reinforcing with some theology. But yeah, so go on.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean that also falls into I've been weirdly heavily into Buddhism lately, and a lot of Buddhism sees things that way too, right? When they say that there's things are, I mean, people really popularize Buddhism in really weird ways. Like they'll say, oh no, there's no self, and that's really not what Buddhism says. It says it's not self, right? So you're not, when you arrive at these peak moments, this is not you because you're not done.
Hmm.
You're the only time where we can decide who you were is when you're done. And as long as you are, as long as you're living, you're not done. So this is not yourself. So you need to move on and keep going
Hmm.
because you're not finished. You're still accumulating actions. You're still doing things and you're still
Hmm.
becoming and you're always becoming. And if you're the same person as you are, like as a 30-year-old man, as you were when you were a 5-year-old, that's really worrying,
Hmm.
right? You'd be really worried about it. You wouldn't be worried about a 5-year-old being a 5-year-old, but you'd be worried about being an eternal 5-year-old. And it's the same thing here. So you're not these things. And once you start seeing things that way, then you start asking it makes you actually quite a bit dangerous to the current established
Well,
society.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, all of this, a
Because
theological religion does in general, because it puts you in you can start revealing your connected truth. You can start peeking, nit breaking away at the spells, and because you're seeing things truthfully, you're taking a perspective that's outside of the ideological frames that they're creating, right? And
well, yeah,
the
it's
way that the note their gnosis, their fake worlds, their make believe worlds work. They only work as long as everyone's in the make believe, right? As soon as if too many people get out of the make believe and start drawing other people's attention to like, hey, this isn't the real world, then the make believe world falls apart. And the the more fake the world, the bigger that becomes a danger. The more dangerous anyone getting connected to the authentic becomes. So absolutely, these this
yeah.
ideas are dangerous to this system that we're in now.
Well, it's dangerous to even the way, like I was talking about, even doing like a meeting, right?
Mhm.
And you step into this meeting and everybody's like, yeah, we're going to have a meeting. We set this meeting up. So let's sit down and have the meeting. And then you sit down and you start asking questions like, what are we about to accomplish here in
Mhm.
this 1 hour? And then nobody has a freaking answer for you. And you're like, oh, well, that's really interesting. Why are we doing this? And then everybody realizes that it's because we've done it before,
Mhm.
right? Oh, we've always done this. This is what
It's
we do before we
it's a
do this thing.
habit.
And it's like,
It's a habit, but
yeah,
is it a
it is a
useful
habit.
habit? Are you making the and getting back to the whole Cain and Abel thing? So habits are always sort of sacrifices because you're sacrificing some of your potential. You're actualizing something. So you're actualizing this meeting is your habit out of habit, but is it the right sacrifice? Is God going to value this sacrifice, or are you like or are you being like Cain and just offering a middling sacrifice that's unconsidered and unattentive, and is God going to reject it, right? And that's I think that's
Well,
what
yeah,
yeah.
even without God in the equation, just think about it this way. If you're looking back at your life
Hmm.
through like video recording, super accurate video recording from every angle,
Hmm.
is what you're doing right now going to make you completely cringe?
Yeah.
If it is, maybe don't do that thing,
Yeah.
right? So I do ask myself that question once in a while. And you know, like you can never get away from it because as you grow, everything you do makes you cringe, but at least you
Hmm.
know, like, am I doing the best possible thing right now?
Yeah.
And if the answer is I'm not, I'm really not doing the best possible thing right now, then you need to stop
Hmm.
and you need to regroup and you need to think about what you're going to be doing because you can't keep going that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, sometimes it means you have to make drastic changes. Sometimes it means you have to ask super inconvenient questions that people maybe nobody dares to ask, but everybody has thought about it.
Hmm.
Uh, but after a while, that's where you get, right? You get to these to this point where you're never going to be popular by questioning everybody's reality.
Hmm.
But are you going to act in a way that you can be proud of in the future? Are you like, what is your arc here? Do you have like a superhero arc or a supervillain arc? Or do you have like the most boring arc that somebody will cancel your show in like 5 minutes?
Hmm.
Right. So you have to think about what it is that you're doing, what your storyline is going to be. And this is falls into, you know, organizing your life properly and understanding your
Hmm.
life has a beginning and an end here. And you need to set it up properly. That's what gets me to uh, do things that I don't want to do. So one of the concepts that I
Hmm.
usually follow is every single day I do one thing that I really don't want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not because I'm masochistic or in any way, shape, or form. Like I don't particularly enjoy
Yeah.
suffering.
You're separating yourself from pathos, though, right? The comfort. That's what I think it's, and that's
Yeah.
actually that's actual freedom. That's actually part of the path. Um, that path towards God, right? Is that idea of and this is actually a big problem. It's like just in society is that we're we're taught that freedom is like this freedom to do whatever you want, right? It's sort of this hedonistic freedom, what Foucault calls libidinal freedom, right? It's just follow, I want to eat chocolate cake today, and if you don't let me eat chocolate cake today, then that's, you're violating my human rights. uh, but freedom actually is like, in order to truly be free, we have to have that discipline to separate ourselves from our pathos, right? There has to be this
Yeah,
supremacy
that's
of
where the
of
payoff
logos.
comes through this
Yeah,
comfort. No, you're right. The payoff comes through it does come through very often through a level of discomfort
yeah, and
because yeah, go ahead.
the ancient Greeks knew this. Like even the word pathetic, right? Pathetic. When we now sort of think of, well, a person who's pathetic, well, the person is regrettable or wretched or something in that way. But from the ancient Greek, meant it's connected to pathos. It means connected to attached to pathos, right? So driven by their passions to be bestial. And what you're doing when you're developing that discipline, you're doing that thing that I don't want to do every day, is you're overcoming that beast, that pathos. And the
Yeah.
and the word pathetic comes from the Greeks looking down at people who didn't have that attachment, who were unable to do the things that they didn't want to do, right? Didn't have that self-control. And so
Yeah, no,
that's where the
that's
freedom
that
actually comes from.
well, it does. I mean, and I dare anybody, I challenge anybody to prove this otherwise. Try to do a bunch of super easy things for as for the next, I don't know, do it for a month. Choose the easy path every single time. Like, do I want to go do sports or am I going to eat this entire pizza? Oh,
Hmm.
the pizza seems interesting. All I got to do is pick up my phone, order it, be at
Hmm.
my door. I can eat it, be great, sit down, binge Netflix, ignore my kids because they're annoying. And right, no, it's those are the sort of the easy that's the easy path, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
gonna everything that's slightly hard, I'm going to avoid. See how far that takes you.
Mm.
Because you'll probably be fat, unhealthy, out of a job, divorced, and your kids won't want to see you.
Hmm.
That's where you're going to be,
But
and
you'll have the
that's maybe a
pizza, at
yeah,
least
you
for the
have
time
to.
being.
You might not
You
have the pizza because you might not
eventually,
be able
yeah.
to afford the pizza
Yeah.
anymore, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but that's the thing is you got to make the hard choice. The hard choice is what's going to make your life easier later. And like anybody who thinks that making the easy choices is what's going to make your life easier is exactly it is they're perfect for this weird illusory society that we're living in right now.
Hmm.
Like they're agents of this weird dystopia that we're
Yeah.
we're in right now because we are in a dystopia. If you wrote about like the current world to somebody, I don't know, like 150 to 100 years
Yeah.
back, they you know they might marvel at some of the stuff that is there and at the same time be completely like taken aback by like don't you guys don't you see through this, don't you understand
Hmm.
like don't you understand that this you're being tricked right now. And like you have all this like your water is free and
Hmm.
or like very low cost and it's clean and you have enough leisure time to go out and do what you want and learn things and you're sitting in front of a tablet created by a corporation watching a show created by another corporation
Hmm.
wasting hours of your life doing this so that you can keep working, so that you can buy more stuff from the same corporations that will make you scared and keep
Yeah.
working so that you can buy more stuff again. And that stuff needs to be delivered fast because you're working hard and you work for your money, so you better get your money's worth. And yeah, we just have to be careful with that because everybody who thinks that way is contributing to this
Yep.
pathological
Well,
way of living.
and that's why I think that theology is more important, not less important right now, because uh I mean, it's easier to see. the necessity of theology in when we're in a crisis mode, right? When you don't have enough to eat in that, right? It's sort of easier to see why we need to have an understanding of like the whole spiritual elements of our lives. But when when you have the free water, when we have the leisure time, it's so much easier to get disconnected, and that's what we see. I mean, throughout history, this isn't the first time that that civilization has fallen into a world of illusions. We've maybe in a sense we this time we've fallen deeper than ever before, but that's because we've sort of risen higher with this sort of
Yeah.
level of technological comfort than ever before. But if we don't, I mean, and what I was talking about with God and Cain and Abel, like eventually that dark kaizen becomes a kaiju, and it's going to consume all of civilization, and we're going to realize like all these things that we have not been paying attention to really do matter. And if we want to avoid that, well, then we actually have to start doing those things of getting back to the discipline, developing like doing
Well,
the difficult things each day, as you're saying, right? Aiming
not
at
only does
authentic
it
things.
matter though on an individual point of view, though, this is, I think, probably one of the reasons why Christian evangelism exists and
Hmm.
other traditions sort of proselytization exist, is that these habits that people have all around you, they're analogous to secondhand smoke.
Yep.
Even if you don't smoke, you might get cancer from it.
Hmm. Yep.
And that's so people who see more clearly are like, okay, I've got to get everybody out of this smoke-filled room, because even if your cigarette's not lit, you're still breathing the air.
Hmm.
And this is what I'm sort of starting to see. I mean, the deconstruction of my entire ideological framework happened not that long ago. So, but you do feel this sort of sense of urgency where you're like, and you sort of have to hold back on it, or else people sort of turn off, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't just put,
Hmm.
because they think that you're just pushing this new ideology on them with
Yeah.
this new sense of urgency. So it's not going to work, right? You have to
Yeah.
think
Well, I mean,
about
because
doing
because
things
they're
in a,
used to that, right? They're used to, oh,
yeah,
you're trying to create some anxiety in me and insert the next NPC chip, and I'm not done with the current ideology chip. Thank you very much.
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
come back to you when I'm in a crisis. But
I'm st
yeah.
I'm still playing this you're being fat phobic if you want to be healthier game. So
Yeah. Yeah.
come back to see me with this game of discipline a little bit later, okay? I'm gonna
Yeah.
have this half box of donuts now. It's that's what it is.
Hmm.
Maybe not half, maybe the whole box, but
Hmm.
it's yeah, that's exactly where it goes. I think um it's really hard. That's one of the things that I've discovered is the moment you start seeing things a little more clearly, it's hard to understand whether you're. The first thing you have to question is, am I getting into somebody else's ideology again? So there's
Hmm.
this weird, like, imposter syndrome where you're doing something and you think like, am I really qualified to be doing this right now? Like when you get
Hmm.
a job, sometimes you get this. I get this all the time. Am I really qualified to do this job right now? Like they just put me into this job, and you start questioning yourself. And this is sort of what happens when you start deconstructing your ideology because you
Hmm.
were in a previous one, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, what's going on right now? And you have this like level of doubt. And I find that is the hardest part of discipline and improvement is you're always stuck questioning whether you're just falling into somebody else's game again.
Yeah.
Because
Well, yeah.
discipline and this kind of thing, that also there's this weird industry around it, right? All
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
videos about it,
Yeah.
and
Well, the problem is that you're like the way that like these pseudo realities nest on each other, right? So
yeah,
it's not that everyone just starts tearing apart at reality, is that there's that someone will create a pseudo reality, add a little bit of fake, and then someone takes that fake pseudo reality and builds a pseudo reality that adds a little bit more fake. So it's sort of like it's sort of become nested. So you never really know. You never it can be it can be easy to perceive to jump out of one pseudo reality and then realize, oh no, I'm just in someone else's ideology. I'm just in another pseudo reality. But there is a core of authenticity underneath it. There is a reality that we can get down to, and through vigilance we can sort of maintain. And there's a virtue that's fundamental here, and that's prudence, right? And it's not
Yeah,
prudence isn't just as we think of it nowadays as of as just having being cautious and having foresight. It's actually prudence is the virtue that is concordance with reality, so that your actions are concordant, and that's the right word, to reality, that you what you want to do manifests in the world, and also it's concordant. There's concordance with the will of God in that too, in the idea that what you're doing, the things you ought to do, and the things that you ought to, and you're manifesting through your actions what ought to be manifested, right? So it's this it's being part of this conduit to the good within the world. um and you can tell when you're doing that, right? If you're paying attention, you can sort of see if you're being prudent, because if you're being prudent, what what the outcomes that are manifested, the fruits of your actions will be in concordance with your intentions and with your
yeah.
spirit.
Well, I strongly believe people know a lot more than they realize inherently. It's just like some people saw big changes, right? Like I got from really rounds to like I could probably fit 3 times in the pants I used to wear.
Hmm.
And then they get back to me and they're like, "Oh, what was your diet? What did you do?" And it's like, hold on a second. You know exactly what I did. Think about it. How are you going to lose weight? How are you going to get healthier? Like, okay, first put down the fork, right? Start thinking about what you're putting in your mouth. Now, do you know what's healthy for you? Of course you do. Everybody freaking knows. We have this social knowledge.
Hmm.
We have we have these millennia of understanding of what we should be putting in our mouth. We have this inherent understanding of what we should be doing. Okay, now you want to gain muscle. You know what to do? Yeah, okay, go lift heavy things. Great. You understand the basics of it. You can build from there. You want to know, like, you want to get better at running. What are you going to do? Yeah, start running. Great. Like, this is not that hard. And this is the thing, is that most truth is actually, it's deceptively simple,
Hmm.
but hard to accomplish because it requires discipline to do. You need to show up every day. You
Yeah.
need to, you're not feeling great that day, you're still showing up for that run.
Yeah. Well, you
Doesn't
don't
matter how well you're doing.
and requires the discipline is sacrifice too, right? And I think that's
Yeah,
actually, I mean, to be from my perspective, I think the question I want to ask is like the finding the time. I know, because like, where do you find the time? Well, it's obvious where you find the time. You sacrifice doing other things. You make the time
yeah,
by choosing what you do with your time. And there's certainly things that I'm choosing to do with my time that I could give up. And there's things that I should other things besides working out that I should be attending to with my time. So
yeah.
I'm
You
sort of
you set up,
curious. Yeah, yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead. Talk about time.
No,
Yeah.
well, yeah. You need to just. Everybody's got time. Anybody telling me they don't have time, I'd question. Like, you don't have 30 minutes. You just watched a 30-minute show.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, but I really want to watch that show. Okay, so what you're telling me is that that show is more important than getting skinny.
Yeah.
Great, not a problem. If that's your final goal,
Hmm.
then you're accomplishing mission accomplished, man. Like, you're less healthy because you decided that you couldn't sacrifice a bit of time for exercise because you don't need that much.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah. So how
you
much
don't
are you
need to
spending?
spend 5 hours. Well,
And generally,
okay,
like,
I spent inordinate amount of times doing exercise, but that's because I
yeah,
enjoy it now. I mean, I've reached a point where this has become like, almost sometimes I have to carve out time where I'm not going to be
exercise.
doing this.
Hmm.
Yeah, where I'm not going to go like lifting and running and doing this kind of stuff because it's cutting into other priorities.
Hmm.
So even there, like every good thing that you're doing can become a vice if you do too much of it, right?
Yeah,
That's
you need
gluttony,
balance.
right?
Yeah, it's virtue lies in the middle, right? It's actually, and that's actually
Yeah.
part of that whole regulation part of why it's the part of the frame regulation then becomes, well, how do I regulate my time and know that I'm attending to the right things and making the right sacrifices,
Well,
right?
so
Because
scheduling my time, I schedule my time in accordance with my goals. So
Mhm.
I work backwards from there.
Yeah.
Instead of working with, I'm starting here. It's like, no, okay, no, that's not the right way of doing this because if I'm starting here, I don't know where I'm going to end. Nobody does this. Who goes somewhere saying, all right, I'm starting from home. I have no idea where that place is, but I'm going to start walking. Like
Hmm.
nobody does this. Everybody understands that when you're going somewhere, you look where you look where you're going, you plan out your route, and you go if you've never been there.
Hmm.
So, this is how I'm planning my days and my time. I'm going to plan my time with where am I going? Okay, I'm going there. What do I got to do for that, right? Do I have to take a bus? Do I have to, can I walk there? Well, you do the same with your days. So, where do I want to go, right? I'm trying to get whatever that goal is. Okay, well, okay, so I understand what I need to do now. Oh, but I'm binging a show right now on Netflix. Okay, well,
That's your
probably not
choice.
going to binge that show anymore because that's not going to get me to destination.
Hmm. That's
So
the thing I have to
there's,
sacrifice, right? That's the comfort I have to sacrifice.
yeah,
That's the trade-off.
yeah, you have to trade off. You have to decide, is what I'm doing in accordance with my goals?
Hmm.
And if the answer is no, then first off, maybe your goals are off, right?
Hmm.
Maybe you're acting in a way that's not in accordance with your goals because you haven't thought your goals through and you set your sights too high and it seems unachievable. Or maybe that's not what your real goals are. Maybe you need to
Hmm.
stop and do a little bit of soul searching to understand what your goals are. Or maybe you're just being too damn lazy and you have to get off your ass and just
Hmm.
start going,
Yeah.
right? But you need to ask yourself that question.
Yeah.
And every action that you do, you can once you know where your destination is, then you could decide moment by moment. You don't really need to carve out time. Time sets itself up for it. I
And
mean,
I just want to actually connect to that because that's the first aspect of Christian asceticism is prayer, and that's goal setting is a big part
yeah,
of prayer, like actually discerning, well, what do I want out of life, God? What am I asking you for?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and that
Meditation does this too, right?
yeah,
Before every
yeah.
meditation session, you have to set, well, not everybody does it, but like I sort of am a fan of Theravada Buddhism for meditation.
Hmm.
And you start with an actual goal setting of
Yeah.
what you're about to do. So agreed.
Yeah. And that's sort of that's the positive direction, right? Is that you're aiming at something with prayer, and then so that's sort of that's setting you towards the logos. That's actually bringing you into the sovereignty of the logos by because then when you're aiming at something, then from there you can reason and discern a plan. So that's a positive direction. And
Yeah.
then there's the like I said, the fasting is is uh is uh is unbinding yourself or pulling yourself away from pathos, making you less pathetic,
Yeah.
like building that discipline. And then the alms giving is the third aspect we haven't really talked about, but that's the sacrificing the self, right? Is the connection
But
to ego, but bringing your ego in, being and it's not the denial of ego completely. It's bringing it under the sovereignty of the logos, right? And the same thing of like the discipline shouldn't be likewise isn't about denying yourself all pleasure and comfort. It's about bringing those things into the sovereignty of the logos. So they're given a place in the plan within your goals. So they're
so
ordered.
think,
They're not
yeah,
gluttonous or extreme versions,
yeah.
unregulated versions of themselves. Sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
think about it this way. Carving out, I do find that I need to carve out time sometimes. but I need to carve out time for watching a show, not for my goals. I
Hmm.
need to carve out times for sitting down and having a drink with friends or coffee with friends or whatever it is, right? Uh, I need to carve out that time. That's the time you're carving out. You're not, your life is, if you're carving out time for your life, for your goals, then you're living your life backwards.
That's a really good
Carving
point.
out, yeah, carving out time, you need to carve out time for leisure, and leisure should be the exception here.
Hmm.
The rest is reaching your goals because that's why we're alive. We're alive to, if you're not alive to reach your goals, like
Yeah.
that's really depressing to me.
Yeah.
Sounds really, really depressing if your life is not about achieving, being better, finding, new ways of doing things and finding a way to live with others. And you were talking about almsgiving. So, um, you know, there are studies that I've read. I can't cite them right now because it's off the top of my head
Hmm.
of like the effects that giving to somebody else has a more positive effect than doing something for yourself.
Hmm.
So I think what it was that study where they gave students a certain amount of money, and I think that the one group was just told they could keep the money, and then they had like a control group who could do whatever they wanted, and the other group was asked to use the money either to make somebody else feel better or to give it to somebody who needs it. And the group that seemed to be the happiest out of this, self-reporting, obviously there are
Hmm.
serious problems with psychology research, but still, the people who reported being the happiest after these types of experiments are almost universally always the people who gave the money to someone else.
Hmm.
What does that say about what our nature is? I mean, that,
Well, yeah, I think it's but it's this self-denial, right? So of the dysregulated self is the thing about that, right? Is
yeah,
because those, students in a comfortable university, they don't need the $5 or the $20. Giving it to someone else, um, it shows that is that proper regulation in that that situation. But it's not just about, like, the almsgiving is about, I think, is more about that it is the charitable spirit, but it's not just about giving money. It's about living for other people too, right? So I think that,
yeah,
like living, like, as a father, living for your kids and your wife is part of um
yeah,
that
yeah.
sacrifice of
Well, you
self, right?
you
That almsgiving.
well, we live for each other. We're not,
Yeah.
again, as I said, we are wired to be a social species. Like nobody seems to be wired in a way where they're not living for others. But you have to think, am I living for others in a positive way or in a really negative way? Like,
Hmm.
am I a dishonest social media influencer who's trying to get everybody to like me because I want everybody to like me because I care about what they think because I'm
Yeah.
living for others? Is my life valued only based on others, or is the value of my life adding
Yeah.
value to others?
Am I saying this because I believe it's valuable, or am I saying this simply because I think people will give me their attention if I say it?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the same with doing things, right? Am I this is the moment that you're doing something with a not with a goal that's not particularly genuine.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
it completely undermines the action,
Yeah.
right? It's
But
what was
saying,
Jordan Peterson always rambling about that somehow I picked up by listening
mhm,
to podcasts in the background. It's the virtue of a man being dangerous and choosing not to use that
yeah.
danger is what makes somebody virtuous, right? If you're capable of doing something and you choose not to do it because you understand that it's not the correct action to do, but
Yeah.
you're capable of doing it, which means that you can protect others,
Yeah.
you can act in a moral way, then that is a truly moral action. It's the same thing for a lot of the stuff that we're doing, right?
Mhm.
What makes these actions moral is our ability to make a choice to Like
It's
what
also
makes,
to connect it to Christianity.
yeah,
In the Beatitudes, they talk about meek, right? And the meaning of meek is like now we think of it as it's often associated with being like timid or weak, but actual meekness is is keeping your that is keeping your sword sheathed, right? Is that ability to be humble about your abilities in the sense of you don't reveal your true power, your strengths unnecessarily. So it's the opposite of bravado, right? So you're instead of
yeah,
like broadcasting how strong you are and trying to intimidate other people, you are instead always understating your power or your strength in the situation to
yeah,
make yourself more
yeah,
open and receptive and to be humble. And I think that's what you're getting about too, right? If there's no virtue in true weakness. The virtue is in meekness, is which is a
yeah,
similar sounding word, but the virtue is in refraining from um throwing your weight around unnecessarily.
yeah. No, exactly. I mean, and you see this, I mean, there's no virtue in advertising your strength because sometimes you don't have any.
Hmm.
I mean, you see some of these guys in the gym who have these giant muscles, they're super chiseled, and you're like, all right, give me 30 push-ups. Oh, can't do it.
Hmm.
Give me one pull-up. Oh shit, they can't do that either. And
Hmm.
then you're like, okay, so how are you going to perform in a fight here? You won't. Okay, great. So your strength is you can't even like scratch the top of your back. You're not even
Hmm.
flexible enough to do that. Like I could literally put a sticker in the middle of your back and you can reach it without somebody else's help. Great. So what this tells me is that there's absolutely no virtue in what you're doing. You're taking that bunch of steroids and performance enhancement drugs to get to this bloated
Hmm.
advertisement of strength is completely useless
Yeah.
because you didn't ask yourself, what's my goal here? All you're saying is, I want to be a walking billboard for strength without actually being strong.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of these. I mean, it's not just gyms. It's just the gym. You see it well advertised, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every fitness influencer guy who's posting without
Yeah.
doing his post without the shirt on
But
to show their abs.
you don't just see it in the fitness world. You see this those sort of shortcuts to making a performative a performance of the virtue rather than actually truly cultivating the virtue all over the
Yeah,
place, right?
yeah.
Certainly.
Virtue signaling is sort of ubiquitous lately.
Hmm.
But
So
yeah,
yeah, I think we should wrap it up here. This has been a really good
yeah,
conversation. One thing's just flowed into the other, but I think we need to time box this and get on to
yeah.
our days. Yeah, but
That was
I
great.
yeah, it was a really great conversation, JF. I always end with two phrases. At the end of these episodes with two phrases. It's the first is residuum revertitur, which means the remnant will return. And it's this idea that we're gonna that that uh that will it's that the church will restore itself, but it's also this idea of like reconnecting to the authentic. We're not stuck in this that good things are coming. The real is still
Yeah.
there, and Viva Cristo Rey. So, so take care, JF,
All
and
right.
have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
You too.